Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Islamic Economics Series. Today, we're exploring a fundamental question with some pretty dramatic consequences. What exactly is economics? And you know what? The answer you think you know? Well, it might not be the whole story, and it has absolutely shaped our world in ways you might not expect.
The answer seems kind of obvious, right? It's about money, markets, supply and demand, that kind of thing. But the definition that underpins almost all modern economic thought is actually a relatively recent invention. And, as we're going to see, that single definition didn't just describe the world, it completely reshaped how we see it and our place in it.
You know, this sharp critique from way back in the 19th century really captures a skepticism that's followed economics around since the beginning. Because how we define the science, it's not just some trivial academic game. It determines the very questions we ask, the tools we use, and ultimately, the answers we find about society and human nature itself.
Okay, so to understand how we got to where we are today, we first need to take a trip back to the old world of economics. It had a very different and, a much more specific focus.
For classical thinkers, like the great John Stuart Mill, economics was fundamentally about a particular human activity, the creation and distribution of actual tangible wealth. The subject was clear, it was concrete. Economics was the science of goods, of services, and the material prosperity of nations. Simple as that.
What's really fascinating here is Mill's own caution. He didn't see economics as a hard science like physics. Not at all. He called it a science of tendencies. He totally understood that human behavior is complex and that countless other motivations could just override the purely economic ones. His predictions, he knew, were true in theory, but not always in practice.
And for almost 100 years, this focus on wealth pretty much dominated the entire field. Political economy was the science of the material world. But then, in 1935, a quiet intellectual revolution was launched in a single essay that would completely redefine the entire discipline.
And this wasn't just some minor adjustment, okay? A British economist named Lionel Robbins came along and proposed a powerful and radically new foundation for the whole field of economics.
So Robbins argued that what makes an action economic isn't what it's about, like money or production. No, instead, it's about the fundamental problem being solved. He said economics was about a universal human condition, the problem of scarcity.
And this right here, this is the pivot. All of a sudden, economics is no longer about wealth, it's about choice. It's the science of how we behave when our desires, our ends, outstrip our limited resources, or scarce means, which of course could be used in all sorts of different ways.
So what does this new definition actually require for a problem to even be considered economic? Well, Robbins laid out a simple but incredibly profound logic.
According to Robbins, anytime these four conditions are met, you are facing an economic problem. It literally doesn't matter if you're a CEO deciding on a factory location or a student just deciding how to spend your afternoon. If you have multiple goals, limited time, and that time can be used for studying or working or just relaxing, you're making an economic choice.
The consequences of this redefinition were, well, they were radical. It massively expanded the empire of economics, pushing its borders into almost every single corner of human life.
So the crucial point here is this absolute explosion in scope. Economics went from a science of the marketplace, focused on material wealth, to a science of, pretty much everything. Any area where humans make choices with limited resources suddenly became fair game for economic analysis.
I mean, think about it. Time is the ultimate scarce resource, right? You've only got 24 hours in a day. So every single decision, from what you eat for breakfast, to who you marry, to how you raise your children, it all involves allocating that scarce resource among competing goals. Under this new definition, these are all economic decisions.
And Robbins himself showed just how far this logic could go. He argued that the political economy of war is an economic topic because it's all about withdrawing scarce goods and services from other potential uses. The theory of profits is about navigating the scarcity of certain knowledge about the future. The logic is consistent, and it's really, really powerful.
But this one definition to rule them all, this idea that economics is just the science of rational choice, it wasn't universally accepted. Not by a long shot. By defining the field so broadly around this one specific type of problem, it implicitly pushed other ways of thinking about the economy to the sidelines.
So let's just briefly look at some of those alternative views that had very different ideas about what economics should have been studying all along.
For example, while Robbins was laser-focused on individual choice, you had thinkers like Karl Marx who argued that the real story was in the power structures and relations of production that actually constrain our choices in the first place. Then you had the Austrian school, which emphasized that true uncertainty about the future can't always be rationally calculated. And institutionalists argued that our decisions are shaped way more by our culture, our habits, and our institutions than by some isolated rational calculation.
So, why does any of this historical debate matter today? It matters because a definition acts like a lens. It brings certain things into sharp focus, in this case, scarcity, choice, efficiency, but it can cause other, equally important things to just fade into the background. The lens we choose shapes our policies, our values, and our very understanding of what it means to be human.
Focusing purely on scarcity and rational choice has given us some incredibly powerful analytical tools. There's no doubt about that. But it's worth asking, what might this lens cause us to miss? What about cooperation, or justice, or meaning, or any of the other human motivations that don't fit neatly into a framework of scarce means and alternative ends? That's a big question, and it's one worth thinking about. See you in the next one. Subscribe, like, and comment.